Hey, this is going to be a little tutorial on drawing a character in a simple line and color style. In this instance, we're going to be drawing Gaara from Naruto, and I'm just going to cover how you would go about collecting reference for a character like this if you're interested in drawing characters from popular culture, anime, video games, whatever. How you kind of interpret that into your own style, if you have a style, or if you're kind of looking at developing a style, how you would think about going about that. And we're basically just going to take it from the idea conception stage, then we're just going to move on to some sketches, construction drawing, final line work, and then some fairly simple color. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'd always suggest doing is find some reference of the character that you'd like to do a drawing of. Even if you're very familiar with them, it's really handy because during the process you're just gonna come across little things that maybe you haven't noticed or you hadn't considered, and it's better to just have an image there so that you can always just check that, as opposed to kind of going back later and being like, oh, you know what, I put his eye patch on the wrong side, or just like a very simple thing that doesn't actually change the feel of the character. The character might still look like the character, but it might be a small detail, and it's a shame to have to go back and redraw that. So the second thing that I always like to do is start with a thumbnail. I can't stress how important that is. Even just in a simple situation like this, I'm going to think about adding a bit of perspective. I see there I kind of just drawing a few perspective lines to give a feeling of the space that he's going to occupy, and I'm just going to start as small as possible to do a little thumbnail sketch there, and that's just going to give me an idea of the pose that he's going to take up. And generally, if I think I guess the dynamics of the pose are going to really affect the character, I'll play around with that pose quite a bit. But I think in the case of Gaara, is really his character is about not having much sort of complex posing. He has a fairly kind of simple pose, and I've kind of drawn him before, like once or twice, I think. So I kind of have an idea for how he kind of sits, and I think generally the idea is that the sand in his kind of gourd is the dynamic aspect of his character, and there's a counterpoint to his character by kind of him being very sort of despondent and inactive. So in that case, it's a fairly simple pose, so I don't have to worry about that too much. But I'm just here starting to think about the construction of this drawing of this character. So like I was kind of showing with that little hand, just think of everything as being simple shapes, simple boxes, simple cylinders. And this is where just putting in that very basic perspective really kind of helps, because you can see that the horizon line is kind of just below his shoulders there, with that kind of line around there where I'm drawing now. That's kind of where our eye is, so we're kind of a little bit below him. He's looking down on us a little bit, and that just helps me place things like the kind of circulature of the hips. If he was wearing a belt, kind of where his belt would be and how much of the top of the belt we would see. And it's also going to affect things like this big kind of the kind of straps that secure the gourd on his back that I'm drawing now. That sort of thing is affected by perspective as well, and it's good to know where those kind of things are turning out. But in general, his character is kind of quite nice and easy to draw, and I think constructing it is quite simple as well. Obviously, I'm going to take a fairly kind of stylized approach to this. I'm not kind of drawing it in the style that the original artist has employed. I'm kind of changing it a bit into my style. So what I have to pay attention to are those things like the kind of relative sizes of different objects, you know, like the gourd, like, you know, his hair, because, you know, like it's good to know which bits you should take along in terms of some of the stylization. Even if you're using a different style, you might have to employ some of the stylistic tropes of your original artist to kind of get the same feeling in the character, even if you're not really thinking of it as being kind of similar stylistically. Sometimes those little stylistic quirks are really what makes a character look like that. So this is, you know, one of those things that kind of makes this sort of drawing fun, is figuring out how to draw a character and what shapes actually go towards making that character look like that character. So I've kind of blocked out most of the basic stuff in terms of his pose, and I mean, you know, that happened fairly quickly, and you know, I wasn't paying too much attention to the face, because it's a, you know, I had the rough face kind of, you know, like blocked in, so I knew it was going to fit. You know, I'm drawing his head. He's a bit more cartoony again than the original manga style. But the key is just to kind of make sure, for me anyway at this stage, is just making sure that all those basic character traits and big objects are kind of there. So like all the straps, you know, how many straps does he have? Does he have like, you know, 3 straps? Do they have buckles? How big are the buckles? Where are those buckles going to go? You know, how big is his hair compared to his head? You know, is it kind of crazy? Is it like small? Is it, you know, like all those things are really going to affect whether or not this looks like Gaara in the end. So, you know, I'm kind of paying a little bit of attention to the sort of style that's used when drawing the original character, but you know, you can see, but you know, I think, you know, like those the 2 black and white reference panels are actually from the comic. The color drawing, I don't know whether it's actually drawn by the original artist. It is drawn by the original artist. I don't know whether it's colored by him, but you can see there's a big variation in the way the hair is kind of drawn just between those 3 images. But in each case, it always looks like Gaara, so it's important to just understand what little aspects are actually creating that likeness with the hair. So I've kind of, you know, gone for that sort of slightly frazzled spikiness. But obviously, you know, with the style that I use, I don't do sort of super spiky anime hair, so I'm kind of tailoring it a little bit. And, you know, that sort of thing is really important to pay attention to, especially if you know the style that you kind of hold and the sort of way that you would represent hair. It can be really important to know that sort of thing and how that is going to intersect with how someone else is going to draw hair. So I think here I'm just going to play around and move the head, make it a little bit smaller. This is something I do, you know, fairly frequently. I just use a lasso tool. You know, you can select lasso tool just by pressing L, and you know, I'll just kind of select something, move it, make it bigger, make it smaller. You know, frequently I'll rotate things just because it's a really easy way to kind of play around with those sort of proportions. And I don't recommend that sort of thing for best drawing practice in general, but it is really useful for, especially in a situation like this, kind of helping you learn about the proportions of a character. So you can see I can kind of, you know, like move different bits and pieces around. And if you kind of, there's a little dot in the middle of the transform box, and that's kind of the fulcrum point of your transform. So depending on which button you hold down, you can actually make the transformation kind of transform from that point. So if I put it, kind of near his hips, I can actually, by holding down the right buttons when I scale, I can make it kind of scale from that point, which is sort of really useful for doing things like what I'm doing now, which is like rotating arms, or while still this is not the kind of thing you can do sort of once a drawing is kind of inked and it's got full lines. But if you're in the construction phase, it can be really useful, not just to kind of save yourself time, but you do get a really good sense of what the what that limb or what that object in your drawing is going to look like when it's kind of rotated at different angles, which I think is actually a really good learning tool, despite that sort of idea of sort of, just like cheating and copying things around and moving it around is not really going to help you become the best artist per se, because I think it's always best to kind of conceive of a drawing and sketch it out first and get most of those proportions and basic things happening right off the bat. And, to an extent, you can't transform your way out of a really bad drawing, but it is really good to kind of see, because you can play around with some of those limbs and sort of say, oh, what does it look like this? What does it look like that? And you can play around with lots of different options without redrawing it, which is more likely to put you in the mindset of experimenting and being very quick to just kind of play around with some sort of like different option for a character, different pose. It's not like, oh man, I got to redraw it. You just like, oh, rotate, yeah, it looks better. Oh, how about this? How about that? And I think that experimentation is really important. So once I've got the basic, the initial rough out done, and I've kind of then gone on top of that, started to add some of these secondary forms. Secondary form would be something, again, like these belt buckles, sort of starting to think about creases in clothing, or fingers, little details like that, which are not about the general overall proportion, but just kind of secondary things. Once that's kind of all starting to feel okay to me, what I'll do is I'll kind of just sort of start to erase out lightly, and then sort of go over it and just define things a little bit more. This is a technique that's similar to if you've ever used something like called a kneaded eraser or a putty eraser, where it's kind of like it's almost like blue tack, really, specific type of eraser, and you can sort of with that eraser kind of dab off pencil marks and make it kind of lighter, and then once you've made that lighter, you can go over and kind of define things more. So this is kind of a technique I would use that way if I was drawing on paper. And I think that sort of eraser is really important if you are drawing on paper. It gives lots of options, but that's basically what I'm doing here is just sort of take that initial construction and just kind of fade it out a bit, erase it a little bit, and then just kind of tighten it up. Just go in there, make sure all the lines are working, and start to think about those little details, like the line of the lips, the nose, the eyes, all that sort of thing. So you can see there, again, I did that with the, he's got the little sort of character on his forehead, and I was kind of looking at how that would go, and then I kind of put it up there and tried to get roughly accurate, and then just moved it around a bit. And you can see here I'm doing, again, a similar thing with the hand. Just erase it out so that I can still see the initial drawing and lines that I did, but I'm basically doing a second pass on it. So just tightening up those lines, figuring out exactly where things are going to go so that I can prepare for inking. And I've made his hand a bit bigger because often when you're drawing a sort of big head style, it's good to have kind of big hands to go with it, because just because it's if you kind of see a hand and a head, there's often a relationship. If you've done any anatomy work or anything like that, you know that kind of generally you should be able to fit like your hand covering your face should, you know, basically go from your chin to kind of your top of your hairline. So, you know, that's like a good situation. You can kind of see that that's quite apparent here in this situation. So, you know, that you can just see the hand is quite close to the face. So that's something which I thought, you know, even though it's kind of got, you know, a cartoony style, and I could use, you know, anything. You can draw tiny hands, and as long as that's consistent throughout the style, it'll still look fine. But, you know, in this case, I was like, oh, I'm just going to make the hands a bit bigger to give it a bit more appeal and a slightly more cartoony feel. So yeah, I'm just going in there and thinking about some of those other secondary forms now. The hand is kind of sorted. I think the hand is probably an important aspect of the drawing. It's kind of fairly front and center, and the face is obviously important. And I'm just getting this interaction here between like the hand kind of, you know, sitting on the arm there. That sort of interaction is really important. So I think it's important to get that sort of thing happening early on, just so that you don't waste time drawing other things that might change once you do actually need to modify the overall pose to fit that sort of change in posture. So in terms of like, you know, how you kind of go about drawing clothing or something, I mean, this you know, he doesn't have much real clothing here, but generally it's about sort of understanding how clothing sort of falls across the form, and just sort of what those lines and creases mean, because you've all seen sort of, you know, the creases that clothing creates, but it's important to understand sort of where they're coming from and logically sort of why they're there, why they're sort of radiating from certain points, why you get creases in certain areas and that sort of thing. So in general here you can see that you know, the cloth sort of bunches up around the arm, and a lot of these patterns of sort of, you know, those radiating lines coming out from, you know, something like the under of the arm there, and then you kind of get those kind of hooks, U-shapes, where the clothing is trying to compress and let out that compression into sort of a more relaxed area. So I really should suggest just sort of looking at clothing and just having a mirror handy. There's nothing more handy than a mirror to kind of sort a lot of this stuff out. You can just, you know, just see how your shirt or something is kind of bending. And often, you know, even if you're dealing with something like, you know, very kind of stylish suit material or something, you know, like a high-end sort of really thick coat, you can often deduce a lot of how that would sort of be bending, you know, just from a t-shirt, because a lot of the laws are the same. And once you kind of get your head around the laws, and you're sort of making the lines and creases going generally the right way, often that's the most important thing. You can kind of play around with different materials and how that would be affected as well, but in general, the thing that will get you across the line the most is just sort of understanding where the creases are coming from, and why they're being created. You know, why you would take a flat sort of material and why it creases when you sort of, you know, drape it across the human form. So a lot of that sort of thing has to do with seams and how the clothing is actually put together. But, you know, here, you know, I'm just kind of demonstrating that it's important to understand that, you know, even clothing, even something which is very thin, you know, even like paper, everything has form, and it's important to understand that it has form, and also just what lines are kind of doing. So, you know, you can see here we've got a bit of paper that's sort of flat, and, you know, there's no kind of line. All we're seeing is the line that's outlining the form from something else. If you kind of crease that paper, you'd also get a line where the paper is creasing. And that's kind of, you know, not necessarily an outline that defines one object separate from another, what it's defining is that that form is changing, and so the paper is changing from, sort of a flat form to the kind of form that's more vertical, and you kind of get a line there, not necessarily because there would always be a line there in reality, but because one side of that paper would be darker than the other, and we just put a line there to kind of denote that. So applying that back to fabric or anything else, but specifically fabric, it's important to kind of understand what the lines that we are kind of drawing fabric with are there to represent. So they're there to represent sort of mostly form change, which is sort of these creases where we've got sort of peaks and valleys being created in the cloth, and that's being defined and described by lines. So and when we're using a comic book style, a line style, often we're abstracting that quite a bit. So sort of the detail I've got on that sort of like jacket arm on the left there, that's kind of not part of actually Gaara. That's sort of putting some more shading in. But often if you're just dealing with line, it's important to really abstract it and understand precisely what we're trying to represent and how many lines you would use to represent that, because obviously you can represent the subtleties of that sort of cloth change, or the cloth change here. We've got this the kind of scarf that he has. There's lots of different ways that we can represent this material, and it's important to understand kind of how our style is going to represent that. Like, how many lines do we use? Some styles would use tons and tons of lines and lots of hatching to suggest shading and more subtle form changes, whereas perhaps other styles might just show one or two lines to really just suggest a form change, or that clothing is sort of creasing in a certain way. If you have a really simple style, like manga often, a lot of manga art does have a simple stylization like that, but frequently it's also realistic. Probably going in the opposite direction would be something like a Tintin style, where it's a really open, clean line style, where there's no rendering of little lines and creases everywhere. It's quite sort of suggestive and abstracted. So obviously it's a matter of kind of knowing your style and the style that you aspire to, and how that style represents things like clothing. That's where you kind of start to get some congruency in the drawings that you're doing. So I'm just trying to kind of draw some of those buckles and see what might be happening there. You see at this point I've kind of forgotten, I've just kind of erased out that the sort of bandana headpiece that he has, and I actually end up going and putting it in a bit later on, kind of after I started colouring, or perhaps like while I'm inking. I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly. So what I'm trying to do here is just kind of, it's obviously it's just him standing there. But as I said before, I do want to give the pose a bit of kind of a dynamic feel, even though it's quite a static pose. Having the sort of scarf he's got sort of have some motion to it, have some sort of life to it, is going to give his character a bit more depth, and more importantly, it's going to give the drawing a few more lines, a few more action lines to work with. So I'm just kind of thinking, sort of, like obviously it's important to sort of think about which forms will be dark, which forms will be light as we are kind of, doing this drawing, because that'll affect how things overlap a little bit. So I'm just adding a bit of shading to, very, very quick shading to that, the sort of black suit he's got under there. And just trying to figure out a bit more of this, a bit more of the form of this scarf that's going on here. And just indicate the ground a little bit. Okay, so this drawing is starting to get to a point where it's looking kind of finished in terms of the rough construction, and because I, just kind of done this, like on this, in this other file with all this reference and stuff, I'm just going to make a new one. So I've just selected that image that I want to make into a new file, and I'm just going to kind of save it and start the inking process. It's worth mentioning that this kind of demo was done, in class as an actual live demo, and obviously the process recorded, and I'm just kind of doing this narration after the fact. So you see there that that kind of image was already quite high resolution. It was sort of maybe 3,500 pixels high, something like that, and I made it a little bit bigger. I made it kind of about sort of typically how I'll do that to increase the size of images, I'll increase the DPI, because then I know that and I'll do this to create the line work, because I think it's really good to create line work when you're working digitally at really high resolution. It gives you a lot more room to move, and just always makes things a bit simpler. So normally what I do is, I've kind of done that sketch or something that was probably on about like an A4 page, which in American measurements would probably be like so like an 8x11 or kind of a letter size sort of image, just like a standard bit of copy paper, but at 300 DPI. And all I do is I increase it to maybe 400 DPI or 500 DPI, and what that means is that after I've done the inking, if I do want to resize it down for coloring, if maybe the computer I'm working on isn't quite fast enough to handle sort of coloring at such a high resolution, I'll just kind of res it down, and I just know to res it down to 300 DPI as opposed to messing around with sizes or pixels. It's always fairly simple, so it's just a quick way of modifying the resolution in a way that's just really obvious. So all I've done is I've just copied that image into this new file, and this could certainly be an image that you had done in its own file originally. And what I do is I just kind of flatten that so that that line work is on a layer, or just copy it to a new layer. And what I do is then just reduce the opacity of that layer, and then I create a new layer on top of that, and I start to basically draw another version of it, which you could equate to inking. But I'm using just the same tool to do the inking as I was to do the drawing, and all it is the simplest brush in Photoshop you can imagine. It's just a round brush. It has, and I'm using a Wacom tablet, obviously, so the Wacom tablet affects the size and the opacity so that it'll kind of fade out a bit, and it'll get smaller as I place less pressure on the tablet. I do have some sort of brushes that I use that are a bit more kind of pencil-ish, they've got a bit more texture to them, but this one always works kind of, fine like it is. And yeah, so all I'm doing is just basically creating a new drawing, and that's the best way I kind of think of it, especially if you're working digitally. If people could traditionally kind of do what we do digitally, they probably would. Really, the only reason that people start by drawing with pencil and then would ink is because it gives you an opportunity to have a two-stage process, whereby you have one chance to kind of define the drawing at a sketchy phase with the pencil, and you get to try all sorts of different possibilities, and you get to erase and kind of just go crazy. And then you have a phase which is about finishing the drawing. So it's no longer about construction or figuring out what the drawing's like. It's about kind of distilling those choices you made and making new sort of cleaner lines. And so this phase is really just about focusing on making like pretty lines. That's the best way to explain it. Just making nice marks and making sure that we define sort of the texture, a lot of the textural aspects of like clothing and hair here, you know. So you see before I was kind of, you know, when I was constructing the hair, I was thinking more about the form, you know, a little bit about the outline, whereas now I'm kind of concerned about, you know, the flow and each specific line and how they're blending into each other. You can see there like a bit of sort of hatching almost, or like stipple effect to kind of give the form of that hair some dimension, some depth, so you can see it's kind of wrapping around a bit. So I'm thinking about those things, which when I was doing the construction, I wasn't really thinking about. So yeah, now I'm just kind of starting on the hand because it's in front of everything else. And I think even though we're drawing digitally, you can kind of erase very easily and do the kind of things that used to involve a lot of whiteout and crazy nonsense like that when you're drawing and inking traditionally. I still think it's good to start sort of in the front and go to the back, because then you can see when I draw that stuff that's behind this hand, I'm not going to have to worry about sort of, you know, where the hand is as I draw it, because the hand is already there. That's a fairly simple concept to sort of start from the front and work your way back. And, you know, obviously if that kind of sounds a bit weird, then it'll make more sense as you kind of, you know, do more inking and practice that sort of thing. So you can see like the technique that I use for inking is fairly sketchy, and this is sort of a quick demo where I doing a lot of this inking again live. So it's there's a class, there's people kind of talking and asking questions, and I'm talking constantly. So it's maybe a bit more sketchy than I would do normally, but this is one of the reasons why I think using really high resolution is important. In the same way that if you're drawing traditionally, you kind of, you know, draw on larger bits of paper. It's the same thing here, you know, like if you are drawing a comic book page, you normally do the original art of that comic book page on a larger bit of paper than it is printed. So same concept here, it lets me become more sketchy. So I was kind of looking at some of the, you know, textural qualities of the reference there and sort of trying to zero in on that a little bit. Again, just trying to put in some rough little buckles and get all those details kind of working right. Again, I don't know how correct a lot of that stuff actually is, but it's just important when you're doing this sort of thing to just give like enough detail to kind of sell the idea, and sort of, you know, make it plausible. Just put in all those little details, and this is a good way. This is a good time when having that reference will be useful, because you can see kind of, especially if you're beginning out as an artist and you're trying to sort of maybe move from sort of maybe just copying the art that you really like to sort of creating your own poses and your own sort of you know, like take on a character. Just check out sort of how much detail they put in, and you know, do they put in belt buckles? Do they draw every little sort of crack in the leather, or you know, how are they even drawing? Do their buckles even work? You know, what's happening? Do they draw fingernails? Do they draw knuckles? Do they, you know, or do they just kind of draw like hands as the rough form? You know, because there's obviously, you know, an almost infinite amount of detail you can add to a drawing. And style is often about sort of abstracting that and finding ways to represent that detail and that world which you're trying to represent. So I'm just checking out the some of the reference again, So I'll constantly be, checking back, looking at this reference, just to kind of make sure I'm on the right track and I don't forget anything. Because, as you see, I kind of totally forgot to put the bandana in, which is, fairly important. It's kind of important that he doesn't wear it kind of on his head. He has it on his on these kind of straps. So again, like this, it's a fairly sketchy inking process, but what I'm trying to do there with that cloth is just think about getting some flow in there. So and still holding on to that base sort of form. So showing the kind of underside of that sort of scarf and the upper side, and just making sure all those sort of things are defined. And often if you do look at actual comic pages, frequently, like some of the really good, nice panels, there's lots of detail in there, but frequently if it's just a small, not quite so important panel, a lot of the line work can be quite sketchy, or if it's not sketchy, it might be kind of sparse in detail. So I think if you're doing this, obviously, because this demo is timed, there's, a serious time pressure to it that is an important factor. But if you are interested in drawing comics, there's always a time pressure. There's always a time factor involved. It's always about trying to draw the most you can in the least amount of time. So, like being able to kind of suggest things and, get away with the least amount possible is always like a really good skill to have. So you see here with inking, like, I was doing things like kind of just drawing the silhouette of the sort of, like wrapping, the leg wrapping that he has. I'm not sure whether he actually has leg wrapping or not, but I kind of put it in there. Like getting that sort of thing in there, just as a quick silhouette, will describe most of the form. And because I think it's going to be sort of black anyway, it doesn't really matter, because the most important thing is just that silhouette, that curvy sort of outline that's going to define, there's some sort of cloth there. And again, because I know that these pants are going to be sort of dark, I don't have to worry too much about the rendering on them, or at least I should say I'm not going to worry too much about the rendering on them here, because all this line work is going to do is give a bit of texture to the dark/black color that's going to go underneath. And yeah, I'm just adding a little bit of kind of dimension and depth to the line work there, just putting a few little kind of shadows and stuff underneath everything. And yeah, you see I often just kind of start with the outline of something, and that's a good practice to have. Just kind of get the basic outline in there first, and make sure that's going to work. And obviously with sort of like digital line work, you can go in there and erase things ad nauseum. Again, you get the best result if you have some quite nice kind of underdrawing to work with, and then you just kind of go straight onto it. That's always the way to get the best result. But if you do make a mistake, frequently what I'll do is I'll be drawing on a layer. So these lines, these finished lines are on a layer. They're on a multiply layer. You can see there again, I'm just adding a few little nicks and notches to that gourd with the outline, and that's going to add a lot of dimension, a lot of depth to this, like what is a fairly simple kind of set of lines. But to go back to the layer thing, these finished lines are on a separate layer, which is above the kind of sketch, which has been faded out. And I've set that layer to multiply. And the way multiply works basically is that black will show up, white will not show up. White will be transparent on that layer. So you'll see that I am working with this little brush, and my foreground color is black. This is just thinking about it as if I'm drawing black ink lines. the background color is white. And so if I press X to swap the background colors, swap the foreground and with the background color and vice versa, it means I'll be able to draw in white. And if I draw in white, it's kind of almost as if that's a little eraser, so I can use the same brush to draw on that layer with white. White will be transparent, so it will erase whatever's there. That's just a little handy little tool if you are kind of doing this sort of technique. And otherwise, generally I won't use a big airbrush or something to kind of fade out ink lines, because I think it kind of ruins the congruency of the concept of it being a solid line. But I will also sort of with a lasso tool select a bunch of lines, erase them, get rid of that stuff. But yeah, if you just need to get rid of or modify a little line here and there, it can be really useful to just sort of swap to white. As long as the layer you're on is a multiply, then just go ahead and kind of erase out a little bit. And the reason this is important is, of course, because as opposed to switching to an eraser where you have to have a different brush on the eraser, like I often have an airbrush set on the eraser, this is a really simple way to have a very similar brush to the one you're painting with, so you're able to erase in a similar kind of style, similar mark style. Okay, so the lines for this are pretty much done, and I'm just going to move on to color. And the first thing that I do when I'm going to color is that I basically create a set of flat colors underneath the lines. And there's a few different ways I do this now, but I think a really good way to start and sort of think about this is to do this with the pencil tool, which is it's kind of a brush. It's like a subtool of the brush tool, basically. So if you hold down Shift and press B, it'll cycle through different types of brush tools, and one of them will be the pencil tool. Or you can just access it via the tool palette by holding down on the brush icon, and you'll be able to get the pencil tool. And the pencil tool basically is same as the brush tool, but it's it's not anti-aliased, which means that the edges are not smooth, they're very harsh, and this makes, once we have flatted out the overall color, this makes selecting those colors which we have put down with the lasso tool, and also then modifying them, either using Paint Bucket or some other similar tool to change those colors really easy. So this is a good technique if you are perhaps still playing around with figuring out what color to pick. So if you're not quite sure what color to pick for, say, a skin tone, or you're not quite confident about what sort of color scheme to make the character, because perhaps the background hasn't been colored yet, this is, like for any reason, this is a really good way to be able to constantly just click, change colors, select colors, and do that non-destructively. This might seem a bit weird, sort of, oh, why does it matter? Why can't I just paint underneath? Basically, this is just painting underneath. Coloring line work is as simple as put the lines on another layer on top. Again, lines on multiply is a good idea, and then you just put color underneath on a separate layer underneath. And that's all I'm doing now, but there's a few tools and techniques we can use to make that A, easier to do in the first place, like quicker, and B, give us a lot more flexibility as we kind of progress through the image, so that we can, change things later. Another reason that I kind of spent a lot of time doing this sort of flat coloring technique is A, because it's something that's done in comic book coloring generally. It's a very common technique to use this sort of style. And also, secondly, B, because when I was doing actual comic books, it would allow me to make sure that each character had exactly the same color. skin tone and all their costume and stuff was consistent from panel to panel and page to page. So just use exactly the same color, use flat color. So you see how this kind of works now. What I've done there is I've got a little action that makes the lines sepia, and there's some simple ways you can do that. That are a little bit simpler than using an action, and I can show you how to do that now. Okay, so we're in Photoshop live now, and I'll just show you a few other ways you can sort of color your lines. So in this case, this is the finished file, and this is the bunch of kind of lines with the actions on it, and all this is a selection of basically color adjustments, and I've got those color adjustments are basically just being applied to the line work. But it does get a bit tricky because I'll show you kind of the most logical way of doing this. The most logical way is just if I have, let's get rid of this, right? So say I've got these lines and I've got them as a multiply kind of layer, and this is the lines, they're basically transparent. If I kind of colorize the lines, I can create a let's try like a selective color adjustment. What I can do is make them kind of sepia in tone, something like this, and I often like to cool off the kind of blacks a little bit. So that's a little bit, it's a similar result to what I had going with the other sepia thing. Now the issue is if I put sort of color underneath it, obviously this selective color is going to be affected. It's going to affect everything underneath. So it's affecting and it's colorizing the flat line, the flat color there. So what you can do is kind of clip the color adjustment to the lines. You think that might work? That doesn't really work because there's no midtones. If you really think about what this color is doing, it's now only affecting this black, and it can't see that there's white there. So it's really only got black and transparent pixels. So there is actually no gray values in this transparent layer. So it's important at this point to maybe just kind of go, let's create a simple, this is the simplest kind of version of line work. You've just got a white layer with black lines on it. And this would be similar to if you had scanned some drawings or something like that. Yeah, in this scenario, you're basically just taking a black and white image and we can kind of colorize it. And now if I set that to multiply and I've got color underneath it, if I clip the selective color to that white and black layer, then that's what we're going to get. Now that's fine. I think that's like a good option, but I always like to have the lines separated and on a transparent layer. And you see, especially in this demo, this is a really good example because I do actually end up putting his little, if we go down here and turn the lines back on, I do end up putting his, where is it? There. I do end up putting his kind of character that's on his forehead on a separate layer and colorize it, which is a good little trick. And you can actually colorize a lot of these layers, but in order to do that, it was necessary for me to kind of have this on a separate layer. So there's just frequently little times when it's good to have your lines on a transparent layer. And the other thing is that if you erase some of this, some of this white, you're going to get it's not exactly going to work the same. So the way I would recommend doing it is to clip the lines to the white layer and then clip the color adjustment to those to that white layer. And you clip by holding Alt or a similar key on the Mac and between layers, and that will unclip and clip them. So this is a really simple way of just taking any kind of line work. If you scanned a drawing and you want to color it, then obviously you just have that single black and white line, and it's just a matter of kind of clipping a color adjustment layer to it and then modifying that. And that's a very simple way to get some sort of sepia lines. And obviously you can also use different types of colorization. You can make them blue if that's gonna go better with your colors. I don't know, it might. And obviously this white layer has to be set to multiply. But if this blue, if you think that's going to work better with the colors you've got, then go for it. There's lots of different options that you can use. So yeah, that's the basic idea. This is a really simple way of adding some color to your lines. Okay, so back to the flatting. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm still using the pencil tool, and you probably would have seen in the where I kind of cut out to the finished file, you could see kind of how these flats ended up. So all I'm doing is I'm just trying to create a layer that has flat colors, and flat as in there's no shading, it's just blocks of flat color. And the goal here is to get all those flat colors as close to the kind of final result as possible. So something to keep in mind is if you are going to put like a shadow layer on these, which we are, then definitely here I'm just checking the reference to see roughly what kind of colors he should be. But if you're going to put a shadow layer on, then think about most of the colors that we're going to use are going to be kind of like mid-tone to highlight sort of colors, because they're going to have a shadow layer applied to them. And so the color that we're picking now is going to be the color that shows through, that's not in shadow, if that makes sense. So pick kind of colors that are a bit lighter, I guess is the best way to put it. And normally I kind of like to start with the skin. Normally the first color that I put down is just a very neutral gray, because that lets me just keep it very simple, and all the color choices that I make subsequent to that will pop out more. And also, I think more important, it means that if I miss a little bit of the flatting here and there, so say I accidentally kind of just leave a little bit and don't choose any color for it, it means that color will have this very neutral kind of mid gray tone that is not going to be very offensive, and it's almost going to be something that you don't really see. So as opposed to if I put fluorescent pink as the base color, it means if I accidentally didn't like put color on top of it, then it's going to be really obvious, and it's going to be a lot more work because I'm going to be required to get rid of that color. Whereas in this case, it's like almost, there might be some little, like, you know, literally, you know, pun intended, sort of gray areas where I'm not quite sure what color I want to go there, but there's just a fairly simple neutral gray there, and that's just a quite a safe color. And you know, you don't need color everywhere in these scenarios, really. It's about colorizing the major important parts of your drawing. And, you know, if there's a little bit, you know, between something, and you're like, oh, well, is that the color that's behind it, or is that the color of the object that's in front of it? It's hard to tell. Then, you know, you can sometimes leave some of those little areas gray, and it's not going to be the end of the world. So that is one reason why I use a kind of fairly neutral tone to begin with. So in this tutorial, we're not really covering how to add a background, but I would also probably put in at least some of the color that I want in the background if I was flatting at this point, so that I know what the colors that I'm using are going to look like against the sort of color in the background. And here what I'm doing is I'm because I've already drawn that character, so but it's obviously red in it needs to be red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of select it from the lines. I'm going to copy it, and you know, this is another thing that can be kind of tricky. That's probably worth going over. That I'll just go over very quickly to talk about how to kind of separate things from your lines layer. Okay, so we're back in Photoshop, and I'm just going to go over how to sort out a couple of these little line things that can pop up. So in Photoshop, we've been drawing on a layer set to multiply, and as I've been saying, it's really handy to be able to paint on this line layer with white and kind of get an erasing effect. It means that, you know, I don't have to sort of switch to an eraser and sort of, you know, go like, oh, that's not the eraser I want. I want a different type of eraser, and then mess around with that. It's almost like you're drawing with white, which can be very handy to kind of, you know, like get rid of, maybe I kind of done something like this and I just want to get rid of that little line there. It's very easy and very handy. What this does do though, is that if I set this to normal, you can see, let's make this kind of a gray. You can see that in all those areas where I have kind of put white, because it's set to normal and not multiply, I can kind of see them. Now, that doesn't matter because we're always going to set it to multiply. But another thing that's really handy to do with lines is to maybe sort of take some of these lines and, you know, in this case, I'll kind of copy them. So I've got some sort of lines on top, and as opposed to like coloring them, especially this is something that used to, you know, people will do a lot when they're coloring comics in a very traditional manner, in a very traditional Western manner, is you can lock the transparency of those lines, and then we can sort of paint and make those lines a certain color. And that's basically what I've done here, is I copied these lines to a new layer. Over here, new layer, I'm pressing Ctrl J, which duplicates the selection that I have and copies it to a new layer. So yeah, I've got that, and I'm going to paint in this. I'll lock the layer, I'll paint, but it's painting on all the white that I've got there, which is annoying, because obviously this only cares what I painted on there and what's transparent, and it's going to fill in everything that's been painted on and leave everything that's transparent because I've locked the transparency of this layer. But of course it's going to paint all the white, which is frustrating. The other situation where this will come in handy to know how to basically separate lines and figure out what's white, what's black, is if you have scanned some artwork and you just have a flat kind of file, and you maybe do want to do this. So that will be a situation where just get rid of that stuff. You have something like this. So you scanned in some lines, and obviously I want to select them and maybe paint in those lines some way. You know, I want to kind of get what's here and make that red. But you know, if I copy that to a new layer, that's kind of fine, but it's obviously got all this white. You know, it's very hard for me to colorize that in that way. So what you can do is, if I go into the channels here, so I'll just merge that back down. We just got a white, very simple white layer with black on it. So black and white layer. Go into channels, and if you make sure nothing else is kind of selected, if I hold down Control and I click on the RGB layer, what it's going to do is it's going to select, let's go into quick mask, see what it's done. What it's done is it's selected all the white on that, in that channel. So then all I have to do is go select, where's inverse? Inverse. And now let's go, now I've basically got a selection of just everything that's black on this layer. Previously it was, I'd selected, again, hold Control, select the RGB, which is all channels combined, and that's obviously selected all the white. Let's inverse that, and I selected all the black. Why is this handy? Because all I need to do now is create a new layer and fill that with black. And I've got a new transparent layer that was created from that, you know, black and white layer that's just got the black lines on it. So now I can go, you know, to my heart's content and sort of paint on here in red. So again, I think, you know, using the colorization method I mentioned previously is a bit more interesting than this. Why? Because let's kind of put some colors underneath. So the way this works is it's kind of just red on green, right? And you know, that's kind of good if you want this very sort of I guess I would say artificial sort of look to the colorization of the lines. But if we use, you know, the method that I was talking about previously, I'll just do it really quickly this time. I'll do it, you know, in a tricky way, just so you can see the difference. All right, so I've got the same technique I used before, but in this case I'm affecting the neutrals, right? So the neutral colors, colors which are more gray, are going to change color, whereas the black lines are going to stay a similar sort of, you know, blackish tone. And what this does is it gives more of a gradient. And you know, if I play around with this a bit kind of further, you know, let's try to get a bit of that sepia sort of look going. So you can see everything that's kind of gray is going more red. It's going by moving the yellow. I've got more magenta, less cyan, so that's really moving everything towards that kind of red look. But the black lines are sort of still, you know, staying kind of black. You know, they're not going this all the same color. And what's more, now that we're multiplying these, the colors that I put underneath are having these colors multiplied onto them. So you can see that around here, if we zoom up really close, we've got some of these interesting gradients that's occurring where we've got this black line here and we've got this kind of green, but as this line kind of fades out, we're sort of starting to get some kind of interesting effects where the lines are actually interacting color-wise with the colors that are underneath, which gives a much more sophisticated look. And you know, this look is obviously going to be much more akin to if you are actually sort of maybe inking on traditional paper with you know, maybe some brown ink, and then you're kind of using watercolors or something. So it gives a bit more subtlety, which I kind of like. And the other thing is, you know, obviously if we kind of do this some more, I can start to affect the blacks as well. So these blacks which were kind of black, I can make them sort of blue. You know, and I was saying I like to do that a little bit, so we can punch them up a bit and change their color a bit. And you know, this again is going to give a bit more subtlety to things. So that's why I like to use those two different methods of coloring lines. And this trick of separating lines, if they're either just scanned or it's a flat black and white layer, you've accidentally merged it, or you've got some sort of errant white bits and pieces. For any reason, if you just want to get back to transparent black lines on a layer, which is a really powerful tool to have for all those reasons I've just said, we just go in here. Let's get rid of all that color stuff. Well, actually, what's the easiest way? Just fill that with black. So you just imagine this is all one simple layer. Like it was before. The way to kind of, you know, separate this out, go into channels, hold down Control or the equivalent Mac keyboard and just click on it, and this is going to select everything that's white. We invert that. You can see new layer, fill with black, and there you go. Okay, so now we're back in the pre-recorded demo, and you can now make much better sense of what I'm doing here. So a good way to sort of play around with colors and select different colors. Obviously, once you've done this with pencil tool, it's quite easy to kind of select colors and then kind of use a paint bucket to just kind of drop different colors in there. And a key thing to pay attention to is some settings up the top, and these kind of things are, you know, best explained by, you know, checking out the help or looking at how to use Photoshop tutorial specifically. But you want to change the tolerance to 0 on both your selection tools and your filling tools, so your magic wand and your paint bucket. You want to turn off anti-aliasing, and that'll basically mean that when you select, it's just going to select those flat colors, and it's not going to interpolate and sort of, you know, select soft edges. Or when you do make a selection, if you've got anti-aliasing on, you make a selection and it's going to you know, create a slight feathering on the edge of that. So here you can see it's never too late to when you're working digitally, just go along and kind of add a bit of stuff to the lines. Now, because I had kind of resized this line work down, it's obviously not quite as crisp now that I'm kind of painting over things and stuff. And what I'm doing here is it's a bit of a hack job, but I think it's interesting to note that probably once it's all said and done, we're not really going to notice that. It's still going to look pretty fine. yeah, at the end of the day, as you know, people are paying more attention to the fact that it now has that extra sort of item of the character's clothing, rather than, you know, the line quality. So there, I was just checking some of those reference details. Again, it's always important to check those little things. You know, the edge of that metal band is kind of curved, and again, I think it was much larger. So I just copied that to a new layer, and I'm erasing stuff out from underneath. Now I'm just going to merge it back down, or I might not merge it back down. So yeah, you can see it's looking kind of a little bit messy, but once the color goes on there, we're not really going to notice that too much. So just like adjusting the flat colors to include that new stuff. So often when it comes to selecting colors, like what color you use for the skin, for different things, I think that's something that takes a lot of practice. In this scenario, I've got a lot to go on. You know, I don't have to make up a new color scheme because I'm going off this sort of color scheme, which is there, which I think is kind of close to the actual colors that he would have. And often if you're sort of, you know, using a character that's already been designed, the color schemes and all that sort of stuff, the pattern that the different colors and shapes will create is quite pleasing. It's already worked out, so it's good to just follow that. But what I'll generally do is kind of select a color, and then I'll kind of just modify it a bit using the hue, saturation, and balance sliders, so that a lot of the colors kind of have some like a common ancestry almost. So, you know, I'll kind of, if I wanted to make that red, you know, of his hair, I'll kind of might select the skin color and then make the skin a lot redder, and that'll kind of help me sort of keep them tied together a little bit. So what I'm doing now is I'm adding a shadow layer, and there's lots of different ways you can do this. In this case, I'm using a hard light layer, and you can see that the color that we're sort of using to paint the shadows is about a 40% black. It's a blue color, and it has a very tiny bit of saturation. So that's just going to create some shadows which are kind of fairly neutral. They're not going to be that dark, and then cool down the colors, make the colors a little bit more blue. So yeah, that's like a nice sort of effect that it has. And all we're doing is just creating a new layer on top of this, on top of the flats. The shadow layer is clipped to the flats layer, and I'm just painting shadows on here with a different brush. This brush is still basically, it's just a round brush, but it doesn't have any opacity. It just has the size is being affected by how hard I'm pressing down on the Wacom tablet. And what that does is just gives me a really clean sort of shadow style. You know, I'm not playing around with opacity or too much stuff like that. This is just sort of much more akin to an anime sort of style, where it's just there's either shadow or it's not shadow. And where you place the shadows again is a sort of a common thing that I think takes a fair while to learn, because really it's no separate to drawing. It's about understanding the form that you're using. It's about understanding the dimensionality of the character, and how light is going to affect that. In this scenario, I'm using quite a simple shading sort of setup, where basically the light is coming from the top right, and more or less what I'm doing is I'm just shading things sort of on the bottom left, if that makes sense. So, you know, and then I'm thinking about where light would be blocked by like his figure. So in this scenario, I'm kind of shadowing the gourd, and I'm saying, okay, well, I'm going to put shadows on the bottom left because the light is coming from the top right, but I'm also going to, behind his head, the light would be casting a shadow, or his head would be casting a shadow. So I'm putting some of that there. And another really handy thing of using something like these flats layers is that I can, as I did there, just select with the magic wand a single item. So in that case, I selected the scarf that he has. And now I'm back on the shadow layer, and I can paint just that scarf, because obviously I've got that scarf's area selected. Now I'm painting on the layer above, and I'm not going to be able to paint anywhere else but on the scarf. So that makes it really easy for me to sort of shade some of those areas without worrying about going elsewhere, and that can actually save a fair bit of time. So in this scenario, even though it might have taken me quite a bit of time to separate those different areas of his costume, now it's a lot easier for me to go in there and just kind of paint around without having to constantly erase little bits and pieces or be really careful. So yeah, that's where this sort of technique becomes very handy. And this is the point at which doing all that stuff beforehand will pay off. So I'm not really shading this in a very realistic manner. I'm just doing sort of just putting a bit of definition, a bit of form in there, because it is a quite abstract way of shading. I'm not doing a lot of painting. I'm not doing heaps of stuff. So I'm just going around and being fairly abstract with the way that I'm defining the forms here, but still paying attention to the lines. When shading, it's really important to pay attention to the lines and what the lines are trying to describe in terms of form and shadow and where things are going. So again, with this hair, I'm just, again, paying attention to the shading that I had. And like I was saying when I was drawing that, trying to think about how those lines are representing the hair and how the hair is kind of wrapping around the head. I'm trying to support that with the shading. And frequently, I think one of the number one mistakes people make with shading, and the number one way that I think people could improve their shading, is to always respect the line work and realize what the line work is trying to do, what it's trying to represent in terms of defining form. And once you do that and you sort of shade it consistently throughout the process, then that's when things start to come to life. It looks like there's light in the scene and everything has form. So I'm going to put a little bit of a background on here because obviously putting him on white is a bit kind of simple. So just put a simple grey behind to let me push a few of these things, and I've created a separate overlay layer above the shadow layer, and I'm just putting a bit of extra fidelity in there. So just a few little touches of subtlety. Gave his face a little bit of some reddy, fleshy glowing, just to show the flesh is a little bit more subtle than just being purely flat. I put a tiny bit of reflected light on the gourd, and just light playing around. So this is just adding, I have those harsh curves, harsh shadows, and now I'm adding a little bit of subtlety in terms of the some gradients in there as well. And that those like two very simple things, like some harsh shadows defining what is light, what is not light, what's dark, and then just a few gradients will come together and add quite a sophisticated look, where it looks like there's a lot more going on than there actually is. So this is a good technique if you are actually drawing comic pages and you need to go really fast. Just some gradients and some simple shadows will go a long way. So again, I've got those basics down. Now I'm just putting a few little adjustment bits and pieces over the top. So maybe some more overlay bits and pieces. I'm just putting a gradient on the background, which is just going to again help pop all those forms out a little bit. So now it's just about adding those final little few touches to the image, which can often add a lot. What I'm going to do is adjust the colors of the whole character a little bit, maybe just tweak them and kind of make them come together a little bit. And So what I've done is I've added a selective color adjustment layer, and I've clipped that to the colors, the flat color layer again, just the same as the shadows were and all that sort of thing. And I've tweaked that a little bit. Now I've created a levels layer above everything right at the top, and I've just kind of punched up the contrast of the character, and I've added a mask to that, and then I've just made sure that that contrast kind of just is popping in the middle of the image around his face. Now I'm kind of adding another selective color adjustment to tweak the colors overall, so that the background and the foreground will start to come together a little bit. And now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of made a little selection to kind of isolate the legs away from the rest of the image, and I just kind of put a bit of atmosphere there, sort of pushing that scarf back. So just painted a little bit of the background color using that quick selection, and that just pushes that back a little bit and gives it a bit more kind of life and dimension. And I find often doing just little things like that will bring what's quite a simple line and color drawing up to that next level, where you're adding a few of those things that you'd see in a painting, like atmospheric perspective and kind of losing some edges and fading things out. But because this is done above everything, like above the lines, it's kind of fade out some of the lines as well. So just kind of adding some more brightness stuff and just fiddling around with the image, because often at this stage you've done all this work. You can either do this sort of thing now, or have a go at doing it now, and then maybe the next day. I think it's often good to come and play around with some of these things and see whether maybe you added too much contrast, too much color adjustment, maybe it looked better before or something like that. So here I'm just messing around with it a little bit, and just seeing like whether it needs a bit of something different. Because often it can be very hard to see how the image is going as you're like zoomed up looking at an eye or something and rendering that. It's good to step back once you're done and sort of go, oh, is the overall image working? Am I looking where I want to look? How's the composition going? How's the background interacting with the foreground, etc. So yeah, and often I'll just group all those adjustment layers that are kind of affecting everything, and I'll just kind of turn them on, turn them off, and see what's happening. Just play around with things, and that's a really good way to learn. Also, what you might do next time. If next time you think, actually, I keep having to add too much contrast at the end to really get an image up there, then it might be like, well, maybe think about adding some more contrast to begin with. So here also, because I've got my foreground separated from my background, this character is on its own layer, I can adjust the background color a little bit as well, and add some extra subtlety there. So I kind of was playing around with making the background slightly different color. So these are very, very subtle shifts that I'm making now, but they will make a big difference. This is the kind of thing that often isn't apparent. There's quite a lot of sort of subtle gradients going on with his face and stuff like that, even though essentially they're all going to read as being flat colors with like quite simple shading. Yeah, those extra gradients and extra like pulling focus to the face and here and there and stuff like that, that will really add that extra level of sort of detail and character, where you can really draw attention to things which are important in your character. And yeah, just playing around with it, adding that little extra bit of subtlety. And once all that's kind of starting to work, then the image will really come together. So I think there I was just tweaking a few of those shadows even at this stage, and because everything's in separate layers, it's really easy to do that. But I think I maybe went back and took some of that back. So it's always a process of adding things, playing around with them, maybe try something out. It's really good having everything separated like this, because you can always go back and play around with stuff, and that will really help you figure out what you might do next time in the beginning. Okay, so that's the end of the tutorial. Thanks for tuning in and following it through to the end. You can see that the basic process that we've covered is fairly simple. You know, it's just about starting out with an idea, doing some sketches, you know, and then, you know, creating a finished sort of construction drawing, figuring out all the problems in that drawing and bringing up to a level where you feel comfortable going and adding these finished lines. So the things to always pay attention to when you're doing this kind of construction line are your perspective, making sure all your form is reading well. You've got as much dimension as you can in there. And, you know, these things can be sketchy because really this stage is just about blocking things in, getting the dimension, getting the proportions, making sure the character is going to look right. It's not about pretty lines. It's about giving yourself, and it really is about you. It's not necessarily about other people looking at it, because no one will ever really see this. And especially when we're doing digital work, you know, I feel, you know, there's even less value in this sort of sketch stage because they just don't look as good as a really nice pencil sketch. It's always a bit kind of messy and stuff. So this is really just about preparing yourself for the next phase, which is this kind of doing finished lines. And I think the more you think about that, the more you think about it that way, the better, because that'll let you really just kind of do the bare minimum here, which kind of lets you then go on and just kind of focus and put a lot of energy into these final lines. And it's good to still have some room there to put a bit of energy into it, and you know, give them as much life as possible. So, and when you're working on these kind of finished lines, it's really just about you know, taking this sketch that you had, all the dimension and form, and just translating it into a really clean, nice line drawing, and just, you know, pay attention to the quality of your lines, but still also pay a lot of attention to the character that you're drawing. You know, just remember that this is a new drawing, and it doesn't matter how much life this one had in it, or how much those sketchy lines were kind of interesting. This is the one that matters. And it's important that you kind of view them as separate drawings. This is a new drawing, and you know, all bets are off. You know, you can't just trace this one and have you know, this one turn out fantastic. You know, you kind of have to make some new choices and maybe see, you know, something might be different that you hadn't considered, but and that will inform you when you go back and kind of, you know, attempt this sort of drawing again. What things do I really need to figure out? You know, did I need to maybe put some more time into the hands when I was constructing them? You know, I would say here, you know, probably like this scarf I think that could have turned out better. So I think next time I'll really go in there and you know, put a bit more effort into that scarf and figuring that out. Maybe the buckles as well. I think the buckles could have had some more detail. So it's just things like that. This kind of process of going from a construction drawing to a line drawing can be viewed kind of as one process. You know, I said they're like separate drawings. They're separate drawings, but they're part of the same process. And you're kind of just preparing yourself to do this second drawing. And anything you can do, the least amount that you can do, the better, because, you know, that's less time, which means you can spend more time doing other stuff, more drawing. You can put your effort into other comic panels and make those better. So, you know, if you kind of think you can draw something, you know, in a finished line style, then, you know, you might just really sort of suggest it. You can see here a lot of these ears. You know, they're pretty messy, but because I've drawn ears before and I kind of know this style that I'm using, I can really just suggest that and then kind of just do another drawing here that kind of works out. A little bit the same with these hands. You know, I felt pretty confident that I could draw something there that was going to look like a hand. So this kind of step at the construction phase is really just to define the lengths of these fingers and a bit of the dimensionality, and just kind of make sure some of those things are going on. But you can see there kind of when I went in and how to go at it when I'm doing the final ones. I'm really redrawing everything. So yeah, just keep in mind those things. It's a complex balance between it being, you know, new drawing old drawing, taking things from the sketch and pulling them forward, and always try and give as much life to your final drawing as possible. And then when we attack the color, there's many different techniques you can use, but basically they all boil down to just putting some color underneath the lines. It's just that simple. So a lot of that depends on what you like doing, whether you like sort of painting and getting more of a painted look. This technique that we're demonstrating today is really about speed. This sort of technique is something that I use for comic books and actual production, because it gives quite a sophisticated look. There's lots of sort of gradient and complexity there, even though the line style and shading style is fairly simple. So that's kind of where that comes from. Obviously, if you're doing an illustration or something, you might have a slightly different approach. Might want to put some more detail, maybe paint up some areas, and yeah. So there's a multitude of different ways you can put color underneath lines. But the technique you use will always either be faster or simpler or easier or more defined. But this one is really good because it always lets us separate the background from the foreground, and we've always got a lot of ability to kind of edit these different elements and also separate out different elements of the art. Here we're separating out the color from the sort of shading. So you can see here, if I just kind of get rid of all the colors that are under there, this drawing's still reading because I've put a lot of color. I've put a lot of dimension in there with this shadow, and you can see there's a bit of this overlay stuff here, which is adding some extra subtlety to that color. But it's really good to play around with things this way because you can, in your mind, separate out different elements of color, and shading and basically the different elements of art. Because everything is made up of colors that something is, and then light falling on that object, and the way that makes those colors change, become darker, become lighter, and yeah, then we just add a lot of adjustments and tweaking and playing around with different effects. It's always possible to kind of bring things together right at the end, and I think it's always important right at the end to just step back and assess your image and sort of think about it. What could be better, what could be worse, and what can be improved upon, and just kind of play around with that and see how far you can go. So yeah, but that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in and checking out this tutorial on how to draw Gaara from Naruto.